Yeah, so we obviously talked a lot about the hypercar class. That's the new shiny bring everybody in. The next class is the LMP2s. Now
Yeah.
this is all the same chassis, all the same sort of engine, and it's sort of your F2 class, isn't it?
It is. I've got to say, I'm a big fan of the current LMP2. Probably the one shame with it is that they have had to slow these cars down when they had the big reset for Hypercar when Hypercar came in, a couple of years ago. The lap times of the Hypercars were deliberately brought back from the 314s, 15s, 16s that the old LMP ones were running in qualifying. They kind of had to do that because to give Hypercar a platform to develop on, they've got to bring them down to a base level, and then over the years we'll see those lap times get back into the three teens in qualifying.
Yeah.
The effect of that, of course, was that the LMP2s, which were running in, I think I want to say around a 3-minute 25 for a qualifying lap a few years ago, they had to be pegged back a bit so as not to embarrass the top class. As you said, they're all run with the same Gibson V8 engine, which sounds beautiful. I love the sound of it. It's something that's quite reliable as well. Yes, they are all Orica 07s. That's very much come as about of the Orica being the chassis to have. There are a number of other chassis that you can have in LMP2, but the guys at Orica, they build the chassis that you need. If you want to win an LMP2, you need an Orica. So that's why you see them all Oricas and not other manufacturers of chassis that we had a few years ago. This is always the hardest class to predict who's going to win it, but I'm sure we'll have a go. This is often one that can be very close at the end. We had a very, very close run a couple of years ago in the end, won by United Autosports. This is the class that I think you're going to see the most unpredictability and probably the most drama that goes all the way to the end of the race. You're going to see drama in Hypercar as well, but I think by the time you get to the last 4 or 5 hours, the field will have been whittled away and you know who's going to be fighting for the win. There's a very big chance with this LMP2 field this year, and there's a lot of quality race teams in this, that you're going to be going into the last couple of hours of the race, and there's still going to be 3, 4, maybe 5 teams with a chance of winning it.
Yeah, this was a class which, of course, Jackie Chan Racing was initially in, and they almost won the race a good few years ago now. Feels like it was only last year, but it was well back.
Yeah, the WRT effort a couple of years ago. Was it last year? Say my brain's all gone mush now on a Monday night whilst I've been back in the car. This was another one. We talked about the Toyota losing the race, just creeping over the line on the 23 hours and 56 minutes of Le Mans. Well, WRT lost and also gained a win at the same time not too long ago, where the car that was in the lead of the race even got beyond the Dunlop Bridge and then had its problem when it broke down on the last lap. Thankfully, it had its sister car behind it, and that came on to take the win.
Yeah, I think that had Yiffy Yi in, if I remember rightly. But obviously in this class, we also get the driver ratings starting to come in, so you can't sit and have 3 pros in the car. So we could see people like Simon Pagenaud, Robert Kubica, all pro drivers in this class, but then you get silver and bronze drivers, and even a Pro-Am class as well.
Yeah, and if we talked about you needing a good trio in Hypercar, in LMP2 it's even more important. By the regulations of the classification of the class, you have to have what some may term a gentleman driver in the car. It's often the driver who's financing the race effort, and the synergy of a team in LMP2 between the drivers is very important. For the faster drivers, it's not necessarily just about driving as quickly as you can. You've got a training effort to do to get your silver or bronze driver to be as quick as possible, because if it's no good Robert Kubica going around and being 2/10 quicker than everybody else if his teammate, when they get in the car, is 4 seconds off the pace over a lap. You also of course have the driver time limits as well, so it's not just a case of scribble a name down on the entry list and they only do 2 laps. No, they've got to do a good chunk of the race that can and often does decide where the victory goes in LMP2.
Yeah, so I mean, we also have another ruling that's affected one of the drivers on the list, actually for Prema, the first team on the list, Juan Manuel Correa, he was in F2 in Barcelona on Saturday
Yep.
and had to, well, Sunday, sorry, it was, wasn't it? And then he had to jump on a plane to get to Le Mans to do 10 laps because that is the ruling of why you can race.
Yeah, so you have a bit of it with the night practice, but that's also another one of the big bits of test day. That if it's a driver who's not competed at Le Mans before, they need to do almost a number of introductory laps. Even the best in the world, you know, if Max Verstappen was to decide that he wanted to come and do Le Mans next year, for example, he would have to do his rookie laps to qualify as a driver for the race. So yeah, a busy schedule there for Correa to get that done, because you want to get that done during test day. You want to shake down the car during test day. You want to get your drivers acclimatized with the circuit, so that once you then get to Wednesday's free practice running and qualifying, Thursday's hyperpole if you're quick enough on the Wednesday, and then the night practice on the Thursday as well. You want to be focusing on the race. You want to be focusing on the race setup, what the weather conditions are for the week ahead. You don't want to be breaking up the rhythm of your practice and race preparation program because, we need to get another 3 or 4 laps in for a driver to actually be able to take the start on Saturday.
Yeah, and all these drivers will try it. You know, we've got some names in here which we've seen around Le Mans for years, like Ben Hanley, Philip Hansen, people like that, and teams. I mean, it's only sort of the last couple of days I've suddenly realised that Jota have sort of split their entries between a hypercar and an LMP2. Mega successful in LMP2. What do you think their position is to be able to split it and still be able to be successful in either class?
I think the main thing, and it's probably the one bit that we didn't touch on hypercar that I am very excited, not necessarily for this year, but for the future of Le Mans and the top class, is, as you say, Jota have proven themselves for many, many years, whether it be at Le Mans or in WEC or in the European Le Mans series or other series. They are one of the best race teams of taking a car, not their own car that they've designed and built, but a car, and getting the most amount of performance out of it.
Yeah.
You know, it says a lot that Porsche decided that, yep, you're going to be the first race team to take a customer one of our Porsche 963s. In terms of running 2 cars in different classes, I don't think it, operationally it'll be too different for them, because they have run multiple cars in LMP2 before. The only difference is that one of them's a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
In terms of where their efforts are, I think they've got to be realistic with their chances in hypercar. This isn't going to be the year that they have the best chance of winning the race. I think they'll quietly want to try and beat the 2 works Porsche 963s.
Yeah.
But they will still have a very, very keen eye on winning LMP2 this year and proving that they are still one of the best LMP2 teams. They are still one of the best teams at running an Oreca 07. And you look at their team, David Heinemeier Hansen, very, very experienced hand. He is the very definition of a strong silver. So he's a very, very good driver to have as part of your team. Oliver Rasmussen, you've got that synergy with 2 Danes in the car there. Bit of a Dane train forming up. And then you've got Pietro Fittipaldi in that car as well as the hot shot. Fast driver will probably do the qualifying laps and is a very, very experienced single-seater driver. So, they're not messing around in LMP2 this year. They are a full-time WEC entry as well. That's another factor for the teams in LMP2 who are full-time WEC entries, that it's double points for Le Mans. So if you can get a big result at Le Mans, it really, really can change the story of your World Endurance Championship season as a whole.
Well, that feeds us very nicely onto what I was going to add, that half the grid for LMP2s are non-WEC entries with nothing to lose. So will that change the thought process for the WEC teams, or do you think they'll just act like it's any other race?
I think in the case of all the teams, first and foremost, they want to win the race. It's similar to how Formula One talks about Monaco Grand Prix being worth half the championship from a psychological sense. I think for LMP2, especially now with the options of being able to step up into hypercar as a customer team, for a lot of the LMP2 teams now, they're almost running their programs as an audition to those manufacturers, to whether it be Cadillac or Porsche or future manufacturers who are going to be coming into the hypercar ranks as well. They want to win Le Mans so they can show to their potential manufacturers that they're going to be buying a car off in the future. Like, look, we're the best of the best in LMP2. Sell a car to us, give us a bit of manufacturer support, give us your best drivers who are available on the weekend. We could end up winning the race overall for you in 2 or 3 years' time. So I think that's very much going to be on the mind of any of the LMP2 teams, whether they're a WEC entry or not, because it carries so much prestige, so much power for the teams to be able to further develop as organisations and companies, more so necessarily than winning the championship outright.
Yeah. And we say about the pro-am entries, they, I'm looking at quite a few of them. You normally generally have one name that you go, okay, yeah, he's there. But you look at sort of Tower Motorsport, you've got Ricky Taylor and Rene Rast in there. I mean, how on earth that's coming in as a pro-am team, I'll never know. But then you've got Ben Hanley in another car. You've got Jan Magnussen, the former F1 driver and father of Kevin Magnussen in one car. Again, a Dane. You got Nicolas Lapierre. You got Guido van der Garde and Patrick Pilet in another car. These pro-am teams are not messing around either.
No. It really is, and I know for the Tower Motorsport one as an example, there is a bit of subject to license on that one for John Ferrano, but they are a team who've done a lot of great work in North America. They know how to run a car pretty well. I mean, I've put my number 8 down for the win in hypercar. I'm not going to do it for LMP2 because it really could be, and it won't not necessarily be one of the WEC teams either. You look at the likes of Edex Sport, Panis Racing. They aren't full-time WEC entries, but they've done a lot of good stuff here at Le Mans 24 Hours previously. They've been strong in the European Le Mans Series as well. They could spring a bit of a surprise again. I think United Autosports will be strong. Yes, I am a little bit biased on that one, being a Yorkshireman and them being based up there. But they've got strong lineups in the shape of Phil Hansen, Philippe Albuquerque, and Frederic Lubin. Joshua Pearson is their new hot shot, similar to how Phil Hansen's been doing this for a few years now. Joshua Pearson's coming through. Tom Blomqvist and Ollie Jarvis, the other 2 drivers in the number 23 car. So I think they're going to be strong. I would not also be surprised if the Alpine Elf team, so this is a bit of a strange one. This was the Alpine team that were operationally running in hypercar last year with something that wasn't really a hypercar. It wasn't really an LMP1 either. They will be coming back. They will be coming. So the Alpine have already announced that they're going to be having a lot of news at Le Mans this week about their 2024 effort and their return to hypercar. Another manufacturer coming into race in the top class. They have not had the best of WEC seasons so far, but as a French team, with all that influence and all that power and that backing from Renault Alpine Group as well, you cannot rule them out. They have been very strong in this race before, and that's kind of one of the good things for the LMP2 teams when they do get to Le Mans. It's a blank piece of paper. It kind of doesn't matter what's happened in the season up to this point. This is your one-off race in a way that your season hangs on as to whether it's going to be a good one or a bad one.
Yeah, and we haven't even mentioned the single-seater specialist Prema, who have got 2 teams in with, I would say, young lineups in terms of experience of Le Mans. You got Bent Viscal, Correa, Ugan, Kvyat, Bertolotti, and Pin in the other car. So there's not a huge amount of Le Mans experience, but there's a huge amount of pace that's been brought across from single seaters.
And I've been particularly impressed with that number 63 effort so far this year. You've got to remember that there's a synergy between Prema Racing and Ferrari as well. These are drivers who I would not be surprised to see in a Ferrari hypercar in a few years' time. But Danny Kvyat, Formula One viewers will know exactly his exploits. He's not slow at all. Mirko Bortolotti, again, and a very experienced hand in endurance racing. Dorian Pain is probably the name that not a lot of people recognise, but she has been absolutely superb so far this season. Real trailblazer. Could create some history this year if that 63 car runs well. It's not necessarily one of my favourites for winning the race, but it's another one of those that if it can survive through the night and keep the pace up, it's a very definition of dark horse in LMP2, and I think they could run quite well.
Come on, man. I know you said you weren't going to, but I want you to nail a number to the mast. Who do you think? I mean, obviously, we've said there's a lot of teams. There's even AF Course in there with another car as well. Let's have a car, one car you think, or two cars you think will be battling for the lead come Sunday morning.
I am going to. You've twisted my arm. I'm going to go for the number 31, Team WRT. Long time runners in GT3 racing, of course. And sadly, I think they would have been the team to run an Audi hypercar effort, but
yes.
That went by the fold. They came into LMP2 a few years ago, and everyone was like, "Oh, okay, well, here's this very successful, GT3 team coming in."
Yeah.
But this is a totally different kettle of fish running a prototype car, and they stunned everybody. Yes, they had the trauma of losing a race win for one of their cars a few years ago in the last lap. But again, they still took the win because they were on for a 1-2 at the time, which is almost unheard of in LMP2. If I'm looking between the two cars, they've got the number 41 with Rui Andrade, Louis Delatraz, and Robert Kubica. That in itself is a very strong team. But for me, that number 31 team, Sean Gelael in there, a silver driver, raced in Formula 2 for many years. He's quick, he's not a slouch. He's a good find as a silver, a good classification for them there. Ferdinand Habsburg has got that experience now around Le Mans. A gold driver in there, and Robin Frijns. I mean, for me, Robin Frijns should have been in Formula 1.
Yeah.
How on earth he wasn't given a seat by one of the midfield teams, I will never know. But he's been, applying his trade with Team WRT for a while now, very well. You've twisted my arm. That's the one that I'm going to go for the LMP2 win, the number 31 Team WRT.
Yeah, it's certainly a team which sort of stands out as. And for people who sort of sit there and go, well, Danny Kvyat, the Torpedo, Sean Gelael wasn't really known for keeping the car together in Formula 2. These two drivers have sort of calmed it down as we go to GT Le Mans.
No, they definitely have, and as I say, particularly with Gelael in that 31, he serves that role of a Quicksilver very well indeed.
We'll move on to what is a sad class, I think, for the final time. The GTEs, and only GTE AM this season. What was the thinking behind that?
Well, it's sadly with GTE Pro, GTE is a whole concept. It's kind of been similar to LMP1 that, and kind of with its predecessors before, with GT1 as an example, and GT2. It's another class that had a halcyon period with lots and lots of manufacturers, as here, Porsche being an example of that. Ford came in for a few years, BMW came in for a few years. GT Pro, for quite a few years, whilst you just had Toyota up in the top class, if you wanted a manufacturer versus manufacturer battle, that's where you looked. And the balance of performance, different type of balance of performance in GT racing. This is more about making sure that cars are hitting a target lap time as opposed to in a window and then allowing the best team to come out on top. The rule makers for GTs very much want there to be, or as back it was in the GT Pro days, an Aston Martin, closely followed by a Ferrari, closely followed by a Corvette, closely followed by a Porsche, and closely followed by a BMW, and you'd have one of each all in the top 5. It was amazing racing. I remember one of my first years of going to Le Mans, standing at the Forest S's, 8 hours into the race, and line astern comes this pack of GTE cars as if the race has only just begun. It was all, for quite a long time, my favourite bit of Le Mans over the LMP2s and LMP1s. But, unfortunately, the costs got too high. It's great having manufacturers in, but I can tell you from having worked for a couple of automotive manufacturers myself, they don't like losing, and when they lose in their formula, that's when they pull out. So we're down to now Porsches, Ferraris, Aston Martins, and the Chevy Corvettes. They are all cars that are at least a couple of years old now. The Fords went a few years ago. BMW pulled out the Mean Machine in all of its glory out as well. The ACO were a bit more proactive on this one. I've got to give it to them on that one as well. They could have quite easily ended up in a situation where their top GT class was in a similar state to LMP1 a few years ago. The decision they've taken is that from 2024, they're going to switch to a GT3-based class. Now, this is a little bit controversial in itself because GT3 has always been shaped up for customer racing as opposed to manufacturers. But I think the time is right to do this. You know, what they've done with Hypercar is they've built a class. Proof is still in the, putting in the eating and all that business. We may be saying completely different in 2 years' time. But the key difference now at the top of the sport is that they have built a category that a manufacturer could come in with 0 years experience and at least be slightly competitive with manufacturers who have been there 4, 5, 6 years. That didn't used to be the case in LMP1.
Yeah.
Again, Nissan 2015 is the greatest example of that. So for manufacturers, previously they could go into GTE, know that there was a balance of performance, know that there would almost be a little bit of rotation round of it's Ferrari's turn to win this year because they've got the pop advantage. Then it was the Chevy, then it was the Aston, then it was the Porsche. That's probably the one thing I didn't particularly like about GTE. You know, they don't necessarily need to be in a GT class to throw off, show their manufacturing muscles anymore. You move them all up into Hypercar. That does then allow you to still have a GT class, still have a GT class with lots of manufacturing representation, not necessarily works team involvement, but you have it as a customer racing class. And I am actually quite excited for GT3 going forward as the GT class at Le Mans, because it's not like we don't have really good, really entertaining GT3 endurance racing around the world. The Nürburgring 24 Hours, for example, has been an incredible event for the last few years with GT3s. Spa 24 Hours, the second GT class in IMSA at the Daytona 24 Hours, that's been a GT3-based formula for a good while and delivered strong, entertaining racing, door-to-door action in GTs, which is what you want. So yeah, I am looking forward to that. And there's going to be new cars coming through in that as well. For GTE, I will be sad to see it go. The missus is coming with me for the first time this year. I have already warned her that I may get teary as the GTEs go through Grand Depart for the final time. Because my first time going to Le Mans in person was 2015.
Yeah.
And yes, as thrilling as it was to see, the Porsches, the Audis, the Toyotas, the LMP2s go through that year, the abiding memory I have is when the wall of noise from the GTEs hit me. I was not expecting it. I'd seen them race, of course. I'd seen them race at Silverstone in the 6 hours in previous, but I hadn't mentally prepared myself for the sheer hit of that many GTE cars all launching off the 24 hours. It's still a decent group of GTE cars that we have. None of them are works efforts, we should say. So that's a little bit of an indicator to the future in GT3 when it's a customer racing category. But yeah, I will be sad to see them go. But I am looking forward to this race nonetheless. There's some great teams in there, some great characters in the GTE AM class who are all going to be wanting to have that title, that mantle of being the last ever GTE winner at Le Mans.
Yeah, I mean, you say there's no works teams. There is Corvette Racing by name.
True, yes.
And AF Course, who are pretty much a works team. But AF Course are actually running 3 cars in this. They've got one in LMP1. They've got the 2 Ferraris in Hypercar as well. I mean, obviously they're not all working on the same car as staff, but a lot of work for that team to get right.
But it is. But if there's an organisation that can do it, it is AF Corsa. They in previous years they've run a couple of regards to hypercar entries. The boys and girls working on that is effectively the same teams that were running the AF Corsa GTE Pro efforts in previous years. So I've got no concerns about AF Corsa being able to manage all those different kinds of cars, because whilst the base of the GTE is the same between Pro and AM, the different driver lineups and the subtleties involved with that meant I think previously that you almost could treat them as two different formulas in terms of how you would manage the races. So I've got no concerns about AF Corsa being able to manage that, just as long as each of them don't get in each other's way, of course, because they're going to be overtaking each other a lot more.
Yeah, well, without saying too much, Williams Esports aren't running a car, so we do have we do have a bit of fair racing in terms of it. But as we look at the GTEs, obviously they're going. We've got GT3s. You were saying how about run in Daytona? They run out in Asia as well.
Yep.
It's going to be much easier to just buy a car and put it everywhere, basically.
Yeah, and that's where I think the ACO have been clever here, is that by taking this step, as I think it's pretty obvious that sadly GTE was coming to the end of its time, as great as it was. What they have done with the decision going forward is they've opened up the door for some really, really. I mean, can you imagine a Rover Racing BMW GT3 running around Le Mans in future years? It's those kind of things that really have me watering at the mouth for a future GT3 series. The thing they do have to be careful of is that they don't end up, and there are going to be some subtle changes to the cars, and talks about body kits and all the rest of it. And a lot can change in 12 months when it comes to Le Mans, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more about the rules and regulations in the next week. To make this a success, they must not allow, and this is where we're going to be a little bit nervous, because history would suggest that they're not particularly good at this. They must not allow GT3 to get ruined by Le Mans specials and some of the sandbagging, shall we say, and little tricks that manufacturers have pulled in previous years. Again, for the casual follower of motorsport, a win in class as a manufacturer at the Le Mans 24 Hours is probably more important than a world championship, because there's more people casually know what the Le Mans 24 Hours is, as opposed to the World Endurance Championship. I'd say that's all for next year, and I just hope for this final GTE run that we get, the BOP hasn't changed too much for these cars, because again, none of them are brand new cars this year. They're all at least 1 year old. That's a requisite of the GTE class. That's not changed in relation to previous years. As you say, there are some really, really good, strong teams in there. You are right to point out that there is a Chevy Corvette run team that is the same team that has had a lot of success in the pro category before, but we should mention that it's not necessarily the same pro driver lineup that they've had in previous years. To reverse it though, they have got a very, very good bronze driver, probably the best bronze driver in the world, if you were to ask me, in the shape of Ben Keating. He's a great guy too. And they've had a lot of good races so far this year. And as a team, they've got a good level of experience that means they could win out.
Yeah, and obviously we can't bypass sort of a GTE class, because these cars are with the touring cars and World Rally, they've developed cars that are less likely to be seen on the road. I think we can say that lately. That's probably why the GTE and GT3 classes and those are the most sort of connectable in the Le Mans.
I mean, part of the regulations, and this is probably where GTE got itself in a little bit of a mess. As much as I love the Ford GT, the most recent Ford GT as a car, that was verging on homologation special, like you used to have back in the Group B rally days. It wasn't really a GT car; it was a prototype car wearing a GT body kit. So, but that aside, the Porsche 911, the Ferrari 488, the Aston Martin Vantage AMI, in fact, the body shells of the Aston Martins, they go through Gaydon. They go through Gaydon just as they would with the road-going Vantage version. They then go down the M40 for preparation down at Banbury at ProDrive. But yes, they do have that connection to the road car, because part of the regulations are that you have to homologate from a road-going version of the same car, and you also have to have, in terms of the engine, certain elements need to be shared, shall we say, with the road-going version, with a little bit of race engineering tweaking on the side.
And
And wham body kits as well. That's the other thing that I'll probably miss with the GTEs. Is the I was brought in a few years ago. I'm going to miss them big diffusers that you see on the GTEs that we probably won't have when we go next year to the GT3 Plus version for 2024.
There's one team that's been talked about loads in WEC, and we can't bypass them because they are on the entry list. Iron Dames, you know, mega impressive last year, and even more impressive, have been brilliant in the WEC as far as I'm concerned.
They have been one of the most entertaining bits of WEC so far this year. Has been the battle between Corvette Racing, the Ben Keating, Nicky Katzberg, Nicholas Veron effort, and the Iron Dames. This, for me, if you want to increase diversity in motorsport, the Iron Dames program is how you do it. They have had some really good runs so far this year. I'm not kidding here. This is a potential class winner. Sarah Bovey, Michelle Gatting, and Rahel Fry. They've been racing together for a good while. They've got that synergy as a team, as three drivers that you need for a good run round Le Mans. They've got the experience now, and clearly from the rounds that we've had so far this year in the World Endurance Championship, they've got the speed. The other key thing for Le Mans being the jewel and the crown, it is saved from some of the success ballast and other things that you see at other rounds of the championship. So the form book, I don't think you necessarily look at the last couple of races. You go back to Sebring, and this was a car that was right up at the front. It's still got to get through the tests of the night, and I think, again, race management's going to be a very, very important one for this team. But yeah, no, I've been really impressed with the Iron Dames, and the future looks bright for them as well. There's links with manufacturers coming into the sport, Lamborghini and others. This is an effort that, from an increasing representation in motorsport, as I say, is how it should be done. They're not being given their own separate class to run in. No, they are in amongst it. They're competing. They're winning. And there's a platform for them to go forward and go on to bigger and better things in future years.
Yeah, it's kind of sort of, let's forget about let's get women into Formula One or something like that. It's, we're here in WEC, we're going to try and win WEC.
Yep.
You know, so we will look now. Pin your colours to a mast. Obviously, if any teams are watching and you catch Andrew in pit lane, please don't slate him for these choices because
or please don't hurt me when I curse you. That one's powerful as well.
Yeah, he has one hell of a commentator's curse. This is probably, I would probably say, one of the toughest because you don't know which teams and which balance of performance or whatever, because it can change this week.
It can, but I would be very, very surprised if that happens on the basis that it's not a pro class anymore.
True,
where we saw those balance of performance changes in GTE after qualifying, even the morning of the race, which I don't think anybody really liked to see. That was very much in reaction, almost after the horses bolted from the stable when they realised that a particular manufacturer had a big advantage over the rest of it. It was often the case with GTE Pro that manufacturers would not show their hands until the qualifying laps went down. For GTE AM, there's much less reason for teams to do that. So I'd be very surprised if we do see any BOP changes after Thursday night. You're going to twist my arm again?
Yes, I am.
Ooh. I mean, the two cars that I've mentioned are definitely part of the discussion. I'm interested to see how the Richard Mille AF Corsa effort go to number 83. That's one of the full-time WEC entries. Luis Perez Compang, Alessia Rivera, and Lila Wadu, another female driver who's been doing some great work so far this year. You've got some very experienced teams in like the shape of TF Sport and the Aston Martin, Harlan Robin, Maxime Robin, and Valentin Hassaclaw. The Aston Martin has tended to run pretty well round Le Mans. You've still got a very good effort in Northwest AMR with Ian James, Daniel Mancinelli, and Alex Riveras. Got to give some Porsches in that discussion as well. Surely Porsches at Le Mans always tend to run well. Proton Competition, who doesn't, if Proton Competition don't know something about running a Porsche at Le Mans, it's not worth knowing. If you ask me, Harry Ticknell is, the linchpin of that team. He's the platinum driver, coaching Donald Yount and Jonas Reed in there. That's a car that could be part of things as well. Dempsey Proton Racing's Porsche, the number 77, Christian Reed, very experienced driver, has pretty much done every single WEC race since the championship started. Mikkel Pedersen and Julian Andlauer. But I think I'm going to come back to the Corvette here. Similar to the Iron Dames, it was very, very quick back at Sebring. And I think this is Ben Keating's year. He's got Nicky Katzberg alongside him, Nicolas Veron as well. It would be a wonderful way for the GTE era to finish if Ben Keating, the man who's been trying for so many years to have the result that he's cherished, that P1 in class at Le Mans. He's driven pretty much every single GTE car apart from the BMW, I think, over the years. So they are going to be my tips, because I think they've got the drivers who can do it, but they've got that logistical effort behind them that is proven, that is known. I almost don't want to say it because I don't want to curse them, but yeah, the number 33 Corvette Racing entry is my tip for the win in GTE AM.
Is there anything behind that it is literally the only Chevrolet in the race? Other teams will have, Porsche, Ferrari will have, Aston Martin will have data between teams. I know they won't share it completely, but there'll be something. There's one Chevrolet to concentrate.
Yeah, that is a very good point. But again, they've got all data from previous years to lean back on, and the weather conditions look typically Le Mans-ish. It's going to be hot sometimes. It's going to be wet sometimes. It's not going to be anything that you haven't experienced before.
Yeah, I mean, the Chevrolet Corvette always came alive in the Pro class at Le Mans.
Yeah.
And just to add, Andrew's had to look at this because in terms of weather, because he's camping.
Got to be well prepared.
And a British man goes camping. He takes everything with him.
I've got a space this year as well.
Yeah. The final class, which people don't often know about, is the innovative class. I think they call it Garage 56.
Garage 56 is its nickname. It's a little bit defunct now, because it used to be the case that was the 56 Garage, because there was 55 cars across the competition classes, shall we say.
Yeah.
And then a few years ago, they wanted to give the opportunity for almost like demonstration vehicles to run in the race. Now, yes, they're not competing for LMP1 honours or hypercar honours today, or LMP2 or anything like that, but they are very much still part of the race. They're on there, they're on the timing screen, they're in the classification. Probably still the most famous one of them is the very first one, when Nissan sponsored the Delta Wing effort. One of the projects that could have ended up being what is now the current IndyCar. They went in a different way, of course. But it's been a class that's previously been used as a technology demonstrator. So, say Delta Wing being the first example. Nissan then returned a few years later with the Zeod, which was an alternative electric powertrain base car. That one didn't do very well. From memory, I don't think it only did about 2 or 3 laps in the race, and then went bang. Very interesting project a few years ago. Run by Frédéric Saucet, who's a driver who sadly had a disease and illness that meant he lost his limbs. So that was a car that it was basically an LMP2 car, but a car that could be switched from a able-bodied driver, shall we say, over to Frédéric with a system that allowed him to control the same car. So it wasn't necessarily a car all for athletes who suffered loss of limb. It had that switch over to dual control ability that was very interesting. This year, there may be
before you jump onto this year, last year was the hydrogen car, which was, or was that the year before? Can't quite remember. We had the hydrogen.
There's a hydrogen car that did a demo lap, but was not part of the race.
I thought there was one with, I want to say it was Lapierre or somebody. And it was taking forever to do pit stops.
I think that was. it might have been the Zeod as well, which had some troubles. But yeah, there was a hydrogen car that ran round and did a demo lap as part of the warm up um, for the series. And the ACO are still looking at hydrogen fuel cell as a potential way forward. If you look at some of their plans for garage extensions, for example, there's that infrastructure for the technology to be put in. I think we're still a couple of years off that one, to be honest. And I know there's a lot of people working very hard in the background to get that one working. But yeah, the innovative car class this year, this was a really left field one when it was announced. And I'll be honest, at first it kind of perplexed me as to why would they run a NASCAR round Le Mans. But actually, if you go far back enough during the history of the Le Mans 24 Hours, and what a year of any year to celebrate the history of the race, NASCAR cars were eligible. They did have a class, if you go back a few decades enough, where the cars that you would run in what is now the Sprint Cup would come over and race in the 24 Hours. And that's what they're doing this year. Hendrick Motorsport's bringing one of the Chevy Camaro ZL1s over. And yes, it's not part of, it's not going for a trophy, it's not going for class honours. This is going to be one of the most exciting things on circuit this year. It's going to put a lot of smiles on people's faces, and it's got a cracking driver lineup as well. Jimmy Johnson, absolute legend in the world of NASCAR. Mike Rockefeller, great to see Mike back at Le Mans, for a long time racing in LMP1. And the heartthrob himself, Jenson Button. Sorry, I wasn't meant to say that bit, was I? But no, JB back at Le Mans. I, for my sins, never got to see a Formula One race with JB at the wheel. And JB's one of my favourite drivers of all time. Seeing him in the LMP1 effort from a few years ago in one of the customer teams was, I had to pinch myself. It's like after all these years, I'm finally seeing Jenson Button drive live on a race circuit. So yeah, really just looking forward to just enjoying that car going round and making a lot of noise. And I'm sure the three drivers in that car are going to have a lot of fun along the way.
Well, what I've seen so far of it may become a bigger meme than the BMW GTE.
It's a big old girl, that Chevy Camaro. So no, it's not running competitively in that it's trying to beat other cars for a trophy, but it is genuinely interesting from an engineering perspective as well. I know a couple of people maybe scoffed at it, going, "Oh, well, what's new about that? It's a NASCAR. It's a series that's
turning right.
It's turning in one direction, and the powertrain wise, they're still back in the Stone Age. It's like, well, in terms of how it develops its lap time, that's what I'm interested in. How are the other teams going to negotiate getting by it? From what we saw on test day, it's not slow either. So yeah, it may not be vehicle wise the most innovative thing that has ever run in that invitational class, but there's more to engineering a race car than just how the car goes together. It's how you use it as well.
Well, that was something I was going to bring up. In the test day, they've found themselves about 3 seconds since they first run the car around Le Mans. And it's put them just in front of a GTM. And there's a bit of a concern with safety cars and things like that. So would you be able to kind of explain why there's this worry?
I don't know if I can. It's
it seemed to be the first thing that come out of test day, and I was like, well, if it's quicker, what does it matter?
Yeah, I'll have to read up on that one. I would say I'm a little bit behind on test day because I was down at Clay Pigeon yesterday. But it's. I wouldn't necessarily be worried about it from a safety car perspective. It's again going to be more how the faster cars get by it, and how the cars that maybe are quicker than it in certain sections of the track. Sorry, I'm going to bring the Nissan back into things.
No, feel free.
Is whether we get a situation a little bit like what we saw with the 2015 Nissan, where it was pretty abysmal through the corners, and for various reasons they couldn't take curbs. They were literally having to do a longer lap than everybody else, otherwise the car was going to fall apart. What it meant is that the LMP2s were far quicker than it through the corners, but the one thing the Nissan did very, very well was go in a straight line. And where we camp is on the inside of Tertre Rouge corner, which for those of you who know Le Mans is a quite high-speed corner, but there is a braking effort into it, and it's preceded by the Forest S. So a sequence of corners where the Nissan wasn't particularly quick. And you could see LMP2s almost like, come on, get out of the way. It's like something on the Coventry Ring Road on a Friday night. But the second they'd get onto the Mulsanne Straight, the Nissan would just kick in with its sheer power and pull away from the LMP2 cars. And this would go on for lap after lap after lap. You'd see the same LMP2 car stuck behind the Nissan until it cooked its brakes, because that was often the problem with the Nissan that year, that they had to go in to change it for another set of discs and pads for reasons that I won't bore you with now. But it was a real challenge for those LMP2 cars, because ultimately, if you could get ahead and stay ahead of the Nissan, you were gaining a couple of seconds per lap, which, over a 10-lap period, you've suddenly got half a minute on your rivals. But you had to get in front of the Nissan first to achieve that. So, that's going to be the thing, that if the NASCAR is of similar pace to the GTEs, and I'm just reminding myself now that in the second session, the NASCAR did a 3:53. The fastest GTE car did a 3:56. But when you look at it in kph, that yes, the Chevy was a little bit quicker. If you get that scenario where those two lap times start to come together, and in fact the GTE gets quicker on sheer pace over a lap, will we start to have some problems where it's struggling to get by and stay ahead of the NASCAR? That's going to be an interesting and different element of the race this year, I think.
Well, I'm obviously not going to... Well, you might jinx it, so I'm not going to ask you who's going to win the innovative car class, because there's one car in it, and we want it to try and finish.
To win the innovative car class. It's just, as long as it doesn't end up like the Delta Wing a few years ago, because that was very sad when that got slapped into a wall.
Yeah, I was actually just watching a video of that before we started this.
It was Japanese manufacturer versus Japanese manufacturer in that one. So no, I'm looking forward to seeing that run. And I think as well, because it's something a bit different. That's if someone was to pin and say what the thing you are looking forward to most this year, Andrew, about Le Mans, surely it's going to be the same as, the number of different years you've been and watched it in your garden, all the rest of it. It's like, because of the centenary, there's so much, even before we get onto the raft of manufacturers coming back into the top class, there's so much there this year that hasn't been there before and won't necessarily be there again, whether that be part of the race with the NASCAR or the finale of GTE Am. Outside of the race, I think the last time I heard they've got 65 of the race-winning cars since 1923 running. There's going to be a parade. My sister and my missus love their Disney parades. This is going to be my equivalent to all of those cars going by and doing full laps of the circuit. I think on the Friday. There's going to be so much there that, there probably will be some of it again when we get to the 100th running of the Le Mans 24 Hours in a few years' time. But who knows? So much has happened in the world the last few years. We don't know if we'll still be around by then. So it's that there's so much there this year where the best thing to do, if you're there or if you're watching at home, is just sit, stop, maybe get off the social media and just savour it, because it's going to be a very, very special Le Mans 24 Hours.
Well, we spoke privately before about this last sort of topic. People who haven't watched Le Mans before, where can they sort of keep up to date? Because it's so hard to keep up to date being a 24-hour race.
Yeah, it's I always say go to Radio Le Mans first, so that the radio broadcast coverage, even without any pictures, they paint such a great picture just through words. That is almost my first go-to place for following the race, especially if you're on the move during the weekend as well and you can't be in front of a TV screen. There's the WEC app, so I'm not a massive fan of this, but you do have the race available via the subscription service, and I think you can just pay for Le Mans itself, so you don't necessarily need to pay for the whole season. So you can follow the race over that. That's got the full TV feed. Eurosports, if you've got Eurosports as well, they always cover the race. They've got a really good commentary team as well this year. Better, if I may say so, I might get in trouble for this. Better commentary team this year than they've perhaps had
previous years.
back. And well, they've got a daytime dedicated commentary team, and then they go to the world feed, run by Martin Haven, which is itself. We've got 3 really good commentary teams this year. You like take your pick. You've got the effort with Eurosport, which has got Alex Jakes on it, for example. Lee Diffie's on there as well. They've got some really good technical analysts that will have lots of input, I'm sure. The regular WEC team, run by Martin Haven, Graham Goodwin on that one as well. I think Anthony Davidson's surely going to be on the WEC app and the Eurosport effort. He's going to be a very busy man across the course of the weekend. And then if you want free, then there's no other place but Radio Le Mans. The great effort put on by John Hindhoff and the whole team there. They are, I'd say, if it is your first time, go and listen to Radio Le Mans. They are legends of the series. They're really nice people as well, and they very much present it with the manner of they have people who've been following the race. I mean, heck, there may even be some people still who have been following the race since 1923. Yeah. They'll cover the race for them. They'll cover the race in a way that someone who's brand new into the sport can understand it as well.
And I
it's
think
free. Did I mention that?
Yeah, you mentioned it was free. I think we can also give a shout out to one of our colleagues, Chris McCarthy, who I believe is going to be there for circuit commentary.
I would assume so. I haven't confirmed with it.
I saw something this morning which looked like it might be.
I know he's there. There's going to be an Alpha Live forming of people who are there this weekend. But Chris did the English PA there last year as well. I should also mention with the RLM that they are on an FM frequency. So if you're at the circuit, they are the best ones to follow because they go all the way through in English. You will periodically on the circuit PA hear Chris's voice. Definitely give him a listen when he does that. But his are English bulletin updates. When Chris isn't there, it's in French, which if you don't know French, you're not going to know what's going on.
Yeah.
But no, Chris will be there. I'm sure I'll meet up with him at some point and have a beer with him. It was great to hear him on the English PA last year. He did a fantastic job. I'm sure he'll do another fantastic job again this year. But yes, he is also a way you can follow the race.
Maybe we'll have your voice on it one year.
Maybe one day.
That's the aim.
If someone's crackers enough to let me do it.
Oh, I'm sure they would, and I'm sure you'd still camp it as well.
Oh, got to. That's part of the whole fun.
So, Le Mans, Eurosport, Radio Le Mans, and if you were there, the app as well,
and
yeah. And if you're there, try and get the circuit commentary fully in English. If you obviously
91.2 FM
English.
That's
there you go.
That's all of my lot are being set up with FM radios. It's like stick them on your head. You can all listen together. You can't hear each other, but you'll be able to hear the commentary.
There we go. We told you he's a WEC nerd and a Le Mans nerd. Andrew, thank you.
The background proves it.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say the camera angle proves it for sure. And, you know, it's going to be a great centenary race, anniversary of the first, or whatever we want to call it. Le Mans will try and have a celebration, whatever it is anyway. But thank you for joining us, Andrew.
Not a problem.
Obviously, thank you previously to Wajid for joining us. And, you know, if this video is down well, maybe we'll have another one after Le Mans and see what Andrew's experience of 100th Le Mans was. I'm suspecting it will be good.
We'll hopefully. I'm not very good at editing vlogs. I also had an altercation between the GoPro and some blackcurrant Skittles last year, which prevented a 2022 vlog. But if I get my backside in gear, we will have some content on the Double Dash Motorsport media channels in due course. And especially if you're on Instagram at Double Dash MM, we'll be taking pictures and videos of stuff and going, "Oh, look at that!" So
if I remember rightly, you were doing the draw for the Club 100
we did
iRacing there last year.
We have proven that we can live stream from a field, but if I try and live stream any of the race, then I might get shepherds hooked out of the race circuit, because then we don't want that.
Yeah, we've seen that. We've sort of F1 thinking F1 Manager on YouTube is an issue. But as I say, thank you for joining us, Andrew, and I hope everybody's enjoyed this Le Mans preview. It's been an enjoyable Le Mans preview as well, and it's informed me a lot. And I follow the sport, so hopefully it's informed anybody new to the sport, and you will tune into the Le Mans, which starts. Qualifying is Wednesday.
First sessions of it are Wednesday, Thursday for Hyperpole. Try and catch some of the support races as well. As I say, it's not often that we have track action on the Friday as well, but we're going to have that to save at the circuit as well.
Yeah, for people who don't know, obviously qualifying happens Wednesday, Thursday. So as we said at the start of the show, that will be on Eurosport and Radio Le Mans. And beforehand, they have races like the Road to Le Mans series.
Yeah, so they have a series that runs GT3 cars and LMP3s in it. They often, in fact, this is where I should really know already. They often have one of the manufacturers having its own race. Like previous years, we've had Festival of Aston Martins, for example. It's just all Aston Martins, and it's wonderful. Ferraris in previous years as well. And whilst I'm stalling for time, I'll find out exactly what it is. It's Porsche Carrera Cup this year, so they're running. So yeah, plenty.
That'll be an interesting one, because I've done Porsche Carrera Cup on iRacing around Le Mans, which has been good fun. So hopefully in real life it will be the same. But
and Ferrari Challenge. We've got
Ferrari Challenge. We're in for a feast of cars. Your ears will be ringing as you return to England on Monday.
Yeah. Back on Monday. Big long drive. Back through Rouen.
Are we going in the MX-5 again?
No, sadly the MX-5 is still suffering from its war wounds from 12 months ago. It's not actually moved off the drive since it limped back 12 months ago, and there's more people, so the focus box still gets
up though. A bit more comfort and leg room for the journey. So
I can't do it anymore.
It's possibly your most comfortable journey to Le Mans.
Oh, now if I said it was, I think I'd be in trouble with some of my former Jag colleagues. So it's gonna be in the middle.
Yeah, we won't get you in too much trouble. You already got to walk down pit lane after you pick your favourites. So as I say, that is our Le Mans preview. Thank you for joining us, Wajid and Andrew. And hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and we will see you all very soon. And like Andrew said, if you've got YouTube, / Motorsport Media, same on Instagram, Twitter.
At @MM, I sync them all up. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, it's all at @MM. It's only not on YouTube because Google wouldn't let me change it.
Well, there you go. And on there, you can catch commentary cams, iRacing streams.
Bins flying across Wilton Mill.
Yeah, there's some great stuff. And you can catch Andrew if you want to listen to his commentary with the Super 1 series. You've been part of 750 Motor Club? 750
No,
Motor
not yet.
Club?
I've done BRCC this year.
BRCC it was, yeah.
Club 100, of course. Although not this weekend. Slightly controversial.
Yeah.
And I'm now doing the service to BOKC, of course. T-Side 24 hours. Yeah. Lots of stuff.